Okay, so thank you so much, guys, for joining. So today we are going to complete what we started last week. Last week we started design, develop, and deploy. So this is part one, and the reason we are doing this is we want to understand the complete life cycle, starting from designing using RAML and developing it in Anypoint Studio and deploying it to Cloud Hub. So we want to understand it from end to end. And we started with a hello world example or with a simple example. And we said you have to create Anypoint platform account. Let me log in here, Anypoint. Yeah, so here, log in. This is not my. So this is my username. It expires in 1 month. We say the free trial, it expires in 1 month. So that is why I have Nov here, November. In December, I will make it deck and so on. But the project is here you build in, for example, in Design Center or any projects you have there, they get lost with your account in 1 month. So what you have to do is, it is easy, just download them, put them in your computer before it expires, and then you upload them. So I'm signing in here. So we are looking at, last time we started looking at Design Center. So let's see the use case we have here is, it has these 4 steps. First is API specification using Design Center, and we tested it in Design Center using example data. Then we imported the RAML specification to Anypoint Studio directly from Design Center, and the API key router. We said it generates minimal flows for us. In that case, we had only 1 method. It created 1 flow. It created 1 flow per method, we said. And after we imported it, we enhanced it. What we did was we added actual code so that it returns real data. The difference between this test and this test, we said, was this one, it just returns the example, whereas this one, it returns the real data, because we wrote actual data that returns, that reads in the required data, and it returns it. And we started in it was somewhat very at a high level. We started also looking at the different errors. So let's review this, also review some questions. I have also Kahoot, and let's make sure we complete this today, and tomorrow we are going to continue to the next portion. So the requirement is this one again, if you were not there last week. So what we are doing is we are creating an application that returns the requested W3 schools data. The available data sets are specified here, from customers, orders, as you can see, up to categories. And we say the API in the specification, we are going to pass the data set name as a query parameter, and it must be mandatory. So the query parameter will be required, and we are calling that data. And we said also the data should be returned as JSON. So if I go to Design Center and just to review what we did last time, we have this one here. So I just logged in, I come here to Design Center, and then I see projects I have built here. If you have not built any projects, you will not see anything here. You just go here and create new, and then click new specification. And like what we did last time, you can watch the video if you were there last week. So I'll just open this and say a couple of words, and then we'll start the Kahoot first. So this is our hello world. We say the resources, they start with /. So in this case, we just have only 1 resource. It is W3 schools resource. And the messages, they act on those resources. So like in Anypoint Studio, this is a path, and this is a method that it supports. So this you can see for the resources, methods, and the others at the end we put colons, as you can see. And since this method acts on this result, it should be indented. So there is indentation here, as you can see. It is not directly over, it is not at the same level like the W3 schools, but it is indented. So what we see here is, anyway, we have this resource and we are defining its input and its output. So for the get method, the input, this we have defined query parameter in the input part, and the query parameter name is data, and possible values for the query parameter are specified there using dash, and enum is a keyword we are using there. And the query parameter, we said if we don't explicitly say required false, it will be mandatory. So this one, it is mandatory by default, even if I don't add required true. So this is the input part in the request that we send, and in the response, this is the response part. So the response and this one, both are for the get method. So as you can see, they are indented. So response is also a child of this get method, as you can see. So here we have in the response also, we say the data type we expect is JSON. Also, we gave an example here, and we tested it here in the API console. So the other thing we said here was this part is a file explorer. On the left, we put different files and folders and the dependencies. We put them here and we reference them in the editor. This is the editor, the central part. We will see that in coming classes. So this is the file browser, and this is the editor part, and this is the API console. And at the bottom, this one, we say this is a shelf, and it gives us hints and recommendations based on what we did, what we have in the previous lines, what we have entered. Like, for example, when I just this is an endpoint. So if I click enter, then based on, since this is an endpoint, it brings suggestions here, possible things that I can put for an endpoint. So this is a shelf, it is important. And when you play around, if it gets lost, there is some button around here on the, I think it was somewhere around here. I clicked that and it came back. So let me know anyway in the chat, in the Telegram group, when you play around, if this shelf gets lost, there is a quick fix for that. Okay, so that is what we did last time. And in this part, in the API console, let me say a couple of words here. Okay, so in this API console part, in this part, we tested the endpoint by sending requests. As always, it just retrieves the example data. And the possible query parameters we can select from the drop-down. There was a drop-down where only this one is. And you can make it public. You can also add an expiry date here by just enabling this mocking service and checking make public or make private. You can make it public and you specify expiration date. And when you make it public, you have this link. So that link you can give it like to a friend and they can test it and you get feedback. So this lies in the core concepts of the quick simulation and iteration. You get feedback, you implement something, then you get feedback, you simulate it and you improve it. Then once you have a finalized ramen, you go to development or building is using any point studio. So these are the things we saw. And the other important thing, you have this one, it may look overwhelming for the first time, but if you just look at, try implementing it yourself, not only just looking at, but implementing yourself, and also try to see as many examples as you can. So you can go to GitHub, there is GitHub, in GitHub, I have added a link for it at the bottom here. There are different examples. There are different RAML examples here, and also from Exchange, you are going to see any RAML specification you get, you can just import it here, just import, and you will see it here and try to understand what they are doing. And then from there, you import it to Endpoint Studio and see also what is the API kit router generates and why it is generating that. So by doing like that, it helps you to understand it better. So having said that, now I have let's first see the Kahoot questions I have. And we are going to go to Endpoint Studio, and after completing the Endpoint Studio part, we are going to deploy it, make it public, and test it. So let me go to the Kahoot questions I have are here. In API Designer, what is the left panel called? File browser, editor, API console, or shelf? The left panel. We have left, right, bottom, and central part. Okay. So design center, where are you? So if we come here, we are saying the left panel is this one. What is it called? It is called file browser. As you can see, we have files here, and this is the editor, and this is the shelf, and this is the API console. Okay, next. What is used to model REST API? WSDL, RAML, NAN, both. REST API. Yes, so RAML stands for REST API modeling language. That's good. Whereas WSDL is for SOAP. We'll see examples with SOAP also. Next question. How does API kit determine the number of flows to generate from a RAML specification? So we imported the RAML specification from Design Center to Endpoint Studio last time, and it created flows for us. How did it create? How many flows? How does it know how many flows to create? Creates a separate flow for each resource that contains child resources. Okay, I think this one it contains lots of text even before you read the. Yeah, I should have increased the time for this one. But anyway, let's see. We just have one resource and one method. So it generates one flow for us, but we say it creates one flow per method. If I add more methods here, if I had post here, it will create two flows. If I have another resource with its additional methods, it creates flows for each one of them. So it creates per endpoint. Let me show you what I'm saying here. So this is what we created last time by importing the RAML. So if we just collapse this, see the first one is the API kit, router implementation. The second one is just console. So the flow mainly, the flow is, this is the flow. And you see there is, see how it creates it, that method for that resource. So it creates a flow per method per resource. So if you have a resource that has two flows, it creates per method. Let me check that. Yeah, in the option, what are the choices we have? So the answer for that one is it creates a separate flow for each HTTP method. For each HTTP method, it creates a separate flow. We are going to check if we have two resources with get method. My understanding is it creates two flows. So that means it will be per method, per resource per method. We are going to check that. But this one, it is saying creates a separate flow for each HTTP method. It is not clear whether this is per resource or across all resources. We will check that. Okay. Next question is, what path setting is required for an HTTP listener endpoint. Route all requests to an API kit router. In the API kit router, in the listener, how do we put the paths? Do we use / with curly braces, or with asterisk only, or without anything, just / only? So this one, if we come here, you can see, let me expand it. So this is the API kit router, right? That routes any incoming requests to the appropriate flow. So you see here in the listener, let me, yeah, here. In the path, rather than just a specific name, we have /API /**. So it is this asterisk that it is asking. So it should be asterisk. And when we send the requests, we send, we have localhost, for example, for this one, localhost 8081 /API the resource method, in this case, WC schools, and then query parameter. There is any parameter that should be included. Okay, perfect. Next question. True or false? If our RAM specification has a query parameter, when sending a request, it is mandatory by default. If our RAM specification has a query parameter, when sending a request, it is mandatory by default. So in our API RAM specification, in the API RAM specification, if we included query parameter, and if we explicitly don't say required false, then by default, it is required, is what this is saying. And the answer is true, as you all have answered it correctly. Next question. When trying an API console in Design Center, it returns data from Anypoint Studio. I want you to understand how it is working, where it is getting the data from. So in the API console in Design Center, when you send requests in the mocking service, you can send requests. So this one, what we are saying is, we have this, for example, this implementation, this RAM specification, and we can try it here. I have this endpoint, just one endpoint, click get, try it, and it says data is query parameter required field. So we have the possible options here. I can click send. This is for the people to try it so that you get feedback. So this is simulation. Simulation means you have some prototype and they are experimenting how it works. Does it work as expected? Does it give the data in the required type? Does it have the required fields and so on? So click send. So the data it gives me, as you see, is this example, this one. If I try another field also, still that's the only example it has. So it is going to give me this one always. It doesn't change. This is just dummy example data. Whereas in the Anypoint Studio's actual implementation, if I click customers, it should, if I include customers in the query parameter, it should give me customers. If I specify orders, it should give me for orders and so on. So the answer for this one obviously is false. It doesn't give, it doesn't have any connection or information about Anypoint Studio. It gives data from the example in the RAM specification. Okay. Next question. Are we done? Okay, there is one last question. Which of the following helps us to test the API without writing any code? The console, file browser, shelf, or editor? Final one. So test API without writing any code. Okay, yeah. So in the design center, the file browser here, we don't test API there. Editor here, we write the RAM specification code here. Shelf, it gives us suggestions and hints of what we can use. Whereas the API console, as you can see, we didn't write any code. We just test it by clicking from this input we tested it without writing any code anyway. So the answer is this one, the API console. So this is enough on this part. And let me stop here. Thank you for participating here. Now we will, since we are going to go import it to Anypoint Studio, let's finish also the questions we have on the RAM specification, since they are important questions for those of you especially preparing for certification. So I will make this full screen and review the questions from even the questions we saw last time, just quickly pass over them. And there are other new questions also that we want to look at. So this question, it says, refer to the exhibit. There is an error in the flight underscore ID resources get method. So flight underscore ID resource is here. As you can see, it is a URI parameter because it is within a curly braces, and also there is ID. So this also gives you a hint that the request that this one will return will be data per ID. And if that is the case, this gate acts on this resource, so it should be indented. It should be under this flight underscore ID indented. So the answer for this one, indent the gate under the flight underscore ID resource. That is the answer we said. So the reason is this one acts on this one, whereas this one acts on this one. If this one has to act on this one, it has to be indented. It has to be indented under it. Next question we have is, okay, for this one also, what we said was, what valid RAM retrieves details on a specific order by its order ID as a URI parameter. So there is this specification here. This one is more detailed specification just than this one. Just it needs understanding. So here, if you see it, we have orders resource. Under it, there is order ID resource per ID. And there is a gate method. This gate method acts on this one, so it will return per ID. And there is an example. The fields are specified here, and the output also, the response should be JSON. So you can see, we can mark out. Okay, so here we can say this part is wrong. So I can put it like this. Why is it wrong? Because this one, it should be within curly braces. URI parameter should be within curly braces. This one also the same thing, it is wrong. So it should, these two are out of the options, they are not correct. Whereas this one, okay, this one is correct, it is within curly braces. However, this get is not for this one, rather it is for this one. So this one also, it is not correct. Whereas if we see this under the orders resource, there is order ID, URI parameter, nested resource, and this get method acts on this one, and is what we said. And this question, so this question refer to the exhibit, what data is expected by the post accounts endpoint. So We have account. It has two methods, so we'll have the endpointers, this one and this one. The question is about this one, so just forget this. In this one, let's see the specification. Okay, it expects the data to be of application JSON, and the example fields are here. So we see the fields name, address, up to bank agent ID. So the question is, what data is expected? There is sample data here. This is XML, as you can see. So this is not expected. What is expected is JSON. So this is not in the option. We compare this one and this one, since both of them are JSON data type. The difference, now we see we compare the fields. This one has fields as this example, whereas this one has an ID field. So this is not an option. This one matches the exact example. And when we send data, we don't specify ID also. ID is automatically generated based on some logic on the back end. But we just compare anyway. For this answer, we compare the field specified here and here. And this one matches the fields and the data type, whereas this one, it matches the data type, but it doesn't match the fields. This one, it doesn't match the data type in the fields. So the answer for this one is not the third. The answer is the second. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, this one is the second. It should be the second. So name, address, up to bank agent, name, address, bank agent. This one, it has ID. So probably in the question I saw, there were more. Maybe it was ABCD. So this is the second. Is the answer. Now there are other new questions that you didn't see before. That is why I'm showing this. This one we saw before. In the question it says there is an error in the data type. And this is the error message also here. It says unsupported media type. So if it says that, we see the data type here in the specification is application JSON. So to fix that, what we should send should be the data should be, the request should be application JSON, not the response. Response is what comes from the backend in the responses section. But you see this, it is under the post body, in the post body. That means this is what is sent. So this is under request, not under response, we said. So probably in this one, it is giving error because the data was sent in a different format. It could be text or XML or something. This one also we saw last time. In this question, there is a base URI, and in this specification, it is still the same thing. We are looking at it in different ways so that you understand it well and remember it. Query parameter is mandatory if we don't explicitly say required defaults. So if you have to send a request to this one, you have to add this whole base URI followed by this resource followed by question mark, and this query parameter equals to some value. The value of the query parameter should not matter. At least it will return null. But the correct URI request should include the query parameter as well, and the whole of this base URI. And for that one, this first one is correct. This one, it is not correct. It doesn't have this API here, and also it doesn't have query parameter. This one, it has query parameter, but this part in here, it is not the full base URI. This one is a full base URI, but it doesn't have query parameter. So the answer is 1 anyway. Now, new question. I want you to answer starting from here. What is, we saw this last week. So what is the purpose of the API router element in API kit? In API kit, what's the purpose of the router element? One, it serves as an API implementation. 2, validates requests against RAM API specifications and routes them to API implementations. 3, validates responses returned from API requests and routes them back to the caller for creates native connections using a third-party Java library. Can you answer this question? So we are talking about the API router, right? So what is its purpose? Who can answer this question in the chat? Cool, perfect. Yes. So the API router, we said one thing from the RAML specification, it creates the flows for us, and also it validates requests, not responses. It doesn't validate responses. I mean, response is what is returned. So it validates the requests. If they are appropriate, it routes them to the appropriate implementation. That's perfect. So the answer here is number 2. Let's see this question also. A RAML specification is defined to manage customers with a unique identifier for each customer record. What URI does MuleSoft recommend to uniquely access the customer identified with unique ID 1, 2, 3, 4? We have seen this before. Now I want you to connect it with the implementation. So in RAML, you implement it using the curly braces, and then you bring it to Endpoint Studio and finalize your flow. Now you want to send a request for a specific ID. How do you do that? Do you send it using question mark like this? Or do you send it like this? Or do you use equals to sign? If in the RAML specification it was with curly braces, as a nested resource, do you use equals to sign? Do you use a question mark? Or do you simply use forward slash and give an ID, like in here? The ID is 1, 2, 3, 4. Answer this question also. And then we'll go to the next. So this is not a query parameter. This is URI parameter. And the URI parameter in the RAM specification, the resources specified using curly braces, like for example, the flight underscore ID example we saw. Okay. So if it is the URI parameter, when we send a request, we just use the value. We put it the value here. And if you remember also in Endpoint Studio, when we were building a URI parameter, in the path we were putting, like for example, if this is, we are to call it ID, we put customers forward slash curly braces ID, and then when we send a request, we were just sending localhost colon 8081 colon customers colon forward slash customers forward slash the ID. Just we put it like this. Just the ID number, the ID that we are sending a request for, just put it like this. So remember that we don't use equals to sign. Also, question mark is for query parameters. Okay, we have this question. Refer to the exhibit. How many private flows does API kit generate from the API specifications? So the flows are private flow. Number 1, they don't have a resource when we use API kit, because it refers the API kit listener routes the request to the appropriate flow, so they are private flows. Point number 1. Now the API specification is specified here. We have get, and post. Yes. Okay, that's good. This one clarifies the question we saw before. So the number of flows that the API kit should generate for us should be per endpoint, which is combination of resource and method. So how many endpoints do we have here? We have one under flight, we have 1, which is this get method. Under airplane, we have 1, which is this get method. 2. Under accounters, we have this get method and this post method. So, yep, it should be table 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember that. You can also, when you have some ambiguities, you can just generate, just import an example. This RAM, for example, I can type it and import it in Point Studio and see what it creates for me. That way you practice and you understand it better. So the answer here should be this one. Next question. A company has an API to manage departments, with each department identified by a unique department ID, DPTI. The API was built with RAML according to MuleSoft best practices. What is valid RAML to specify a method to update the details for a specific department? So it is for a specific department. So there is, we will pass department ID. And for a specific department, it has to be URI parameters. Still practicing the same thing. The URI parameter should be using curly braces. Under departments, we expect, this is a nested resource. Under departments, under it, there should be another resource with curly braces called department ID. So the answer for that is not this one. This is not correct implementation. This one, it doesn't have, oh, this one, it has the department ID, but it is not even put, it is put as a query parameter. Does it say, let's call it a company? Yeah, okay. The specific department ID here. So the answer should be this one. The URI parameter should be specified using curly braces. As you can see here, perfect. Okay. This one also, you can also pass it as, it didn't explicitly say it should be a URI parameter. You can also make it a query parameter. If it is optional, I mean, there could be cases where you pass it as query parameter. But anyway, the error with this one is the patch, this method should be, okay, let me take it back. This one, yeah, I think they are expecting it to be explicitly URI parameter. Okay. We have this question, probably this is the last one. A shopping API contains a method to look up store details by department. To get information for a particular store, web clients will submit requests with a query parameter named department. Okay, we have both here. We have a query parameter called department, and this is a query parameter, and a URI parameter named store ID. Now we are combining them both. We have query parameter and URI parameter. So from here, let me move this here so that you can see it. So the URI parameter should be within curly braces. The URI parameter is the store ID. As you can see, I see store ID as a URI parameter. It should come. It is a resource. So we have, it should be as a resource. This one, does it have this one, URI parameter, we don't put it like this. And it doesn't have a query parameter also. This one, it has query parameter, URI parameter is not put like this. And this one, okay, this is good. There is a get method and query parameter has been specified, as you can see. This one also URI parameter is not specified like this. So the answer is this one. Okay. Let me see if I have another question or if we have done. Okay. This other question. Oh, this one is kind of tricky. Pay attention here. Refer to the exhibit. API kit is used to generate flow components for the RAML specification. So the RAML specification has orders with two methods, get and post. And there is also under orders a specific order. So there is this order. I'm not sure if it is a specific one. Anyway, we have this resource, and under that resource, we have another resource. So we have get post here and get patch here. And there is another resource. This is not to confuse you. There is another resource also called reports with get. But now the question, just don't look at this and go to conclusions. Try to read and understand the question. So here it says the Mule application must be available to REST clients using two URLs. This URL, localhost 8081 ACME and localhost 8081, this one. And this API specification, we are generating flows using API kit router. So how many API kit router components are generated to handle requests to every endpoint defined in the RAML specification? We have this RAML specification, and we generated flows using API kit router. The question is, it doesn't say how many flows. It does how many private flows are generated. It is not asking about private flows, rather how many API kit router flows. So we'll see this one with examples, but it should be just one. You can have multiple private flows. The API kit router, it is just one, and it routes them to the appropriate flows. So can consider the API kit router as an entry point here, then it sends them to the appropriate flows. We will see this with examples. Okay, there is one question here. These questions, they help you to prepare for certification. I mean, that's why we are looking at multiple questions. Okay, I minimized it because in full screen it doesn't show all the choices. Let's see here. Refer to the exhibit. This RAML specification includes a resource and a method to retrieve accounts by account type and industry. By account type and industry. So you see this account resource, there is a get method. So for retrieving, we use get method, we know that. It has query parameters. Now two query parameters. Account type is one, as you can see here. It is required, and the possible values are retail and commercial. There is another query parameter called industry. As you can see it here, it is required, and possible values are these ones. So now what we need, the question is saying is account type, resource, retrieve accounts by account type and industry. By account type, some account type should be something, some value. For example, retail from finance, or retail from construction, or retail from government, commercial from finance. Like you have 2 times 3 options basically here. If there are all these possible combinations. Anyway, so the question is, we want to retrieve accounts by account type and industry. So we should have, in this case, both of them are query parameters. As you can see, they are under query parameters. It is nested. So we should have query parameters, as we know. It starts with question mark. This, have question markers. This one and this one, they don't have question markers. I cancel them. And I need this one and this one to specify them for end. As you can see, just this end, we use this ampersand or end sign to include multiple query parameters. And in query parameter, we don't use colon, but we use equals to. So this one is not also an option. So the only option we have, this one is a correct one, which is correct, as you can see, like this. you can, especially when you have some ambiguity, when you forget some concepts, you can first cancel the wrong ones and compare among the ones that you are not sure with. Then now we have only 2, and I know it should be equals to sign. So this one, since it has colon, I cancel this. So this is the correct answer. Okay, so as I said, you can practice more with RAML as we go forward, especially. You don't need to look at this right now because you may get overwhelmed, especially if you have never seen RAML before. But as we practice more and more, you can just go to this GitHub link. There are lots of RAML examples. You import them to Design Center and understand what they are doing. Also, you import them to Endpoint Studio and understand the flows it generates for you and why it is generating all these flows using the API kit router. You can understand that. Okay, we have a couple of minutes. Let's finalize this one today so that we can go to the next topic tomorrow. Okay, so last week we were here. We imported this, and let me. We saw it in debug mode. Let me quickly run this in debug mode. Add breakpoint, add endpoint here, and here. Computer is slow for some reason. Okay. This is the only, yeah, okay. So add in breakpoint here, add breakpoint here, add breakpoint here. We have this console also. We'll see what the console is doing. So in this one, we said it generated one flow, one private flow. See, this is private flows. And private flows, we said, they have their own error handling. Subflows, they don't have their own error handling. Private flows, they have their own error handling. You can put here, that is what you see here, but they don't have a source trigger. This source trigger is empty, so it is private. And so this is the main flow. It says main here even on the top. And all these ones are just for handling the error. It generated it for us for different types of errors, appropriate responses. And in here, we changed this one just from the RAML. After we import it, we added the data to the project. Here, the W3 schools data set is in CSV format, and based on the query parameter, we added this one. So it will return the appropriate data now. The difference between this test and the RAML test is this one. In the API, in Design Center, it was returning the example, whereas this one, it returns actual data, is what we said. Now, let me quickly run this in debug mode, and we saw different errors, 400, 404, and 405. So one way you can remember them is I start from the right and go to the left in the request. Let's send requests from Postman. So from the right, if I have an error in my query parameter, it will be bad request, error code will be 400. If the message is not available, then it will be 404. If the resource is not available, I mean, if the message is not supported, then it will be 405. So what I'm saying is, if the error is in here, it is bad request, and the error is 400, the error code. If this doesn't exist, then it increases, it becomes 404. The resource doesn't exist. And if the method is not allowed for this resource, then it becomes 405, method not supported. So basically, let's get back to this RAM specification again. What it is doing is, first it checks if this exists. Then if it exists, it checks if the method is supported for that resource. And then it goes to query parameter and see if the query parameter is specified correctly. Like, it should be in the right format. And in this case, the possible options are only these ones. If it's specified outside of these ones, it will be an error. So now, and you can see here, for each error, when it is bad request, you have in this transform message, it says bad request. Okay, now this is deployed. Let's send a request. Get method. We have to specify this API also, because it was API in the past for the main flow. It was API /**. So the asterisk corresponds to this part, means the resource and what comes and following that. So we have to specify API here also. If in our path, if it was W3 schools, we don't need this API, but when we use the router by default, it generates the path like this. So I have to add this because we call it here W3 schools. In here also in my request, I have to make it W3 schools. And this query parameter, as you see, if I do this, it should give me the products data the right way in JSON format. Oh, so since it is in debug mode, I come here. You can see the Mule event components here. There is no payload actually, which is known. Here it is in the API router. So it is going to validate the request. If the request is valid, it is going to send it to the flow, to the appropriate flow. If it is not, it invalidates it, and it will go to the appropriate error handler. In this case, we don't have an error. So if I go here, you see it comes to the W3 schools flow. Now I get the data back. If I come here, the data is here in JSON format, actual data, all data, because we are not getting for a specific ID. But you can practice, use this one, take this as an exercise, add a URI parameter under it, and for a specific URI parameter under the different data sets, return for one ID. You can practice with that. Now, if let's see the different error messages, if I make this product, then that query parameter is incorrect because it is not under these possible values for query parameter. Now I get bad request, 400 bad request error. See here, the error code is 200 when it works fine, but now I'm sending incorrect request. So if I click send, see how it invalidates it here. The request has come to API key router. When I click it, when I click next, it invalidates it. Now it generates an error. Now this bad request, it is going to be handled by this flow, bad request. And even if the error is API key bad request, rather than that, what it returns is this message, because we saw this in this listener, in the HTTP listener, under the advanced option, I think. Let me see. Under responses, you see by default it returns the default error message if you don't specify anything. But here we have specified to get the payload, the last payload when an error is generated. And the last payload in this case is this one, which is bad request. So rather than API key bad request, it is just going to return message bad request with error message of 400. You can see the status code also is the default status code. So that's why we get 400 under errors. See here, we have here status code, this HTTP status. Otherwise, it has a default value when it is server error, but here it returns this one. So if I click next, if I come here, you see bad request is here, and the error message is 400. So the error is on the request side in our script when you send the request, and it is 400 now. So what I said is after 400, to remember their order comes, if this is wrong, a resource that doesn't exist, it should be 404. Resource doesn't exist. So if you click send, and if I come here, the request has come, it will be invalidated. When I click next processor, now it should be routed to not allowed, but rather resource doesn't exist. Where is it? Bad request not found. This one. So not found. Resource not found. It should return this one. So rather than see the error is here. So if this error is not intuitive, no one will know what it is. If it just returns the default error message, it will be like this. Whereas this one is human readable, and we understand what it is rather than returning the error message, the default error message. Customizing it like this helps it for users to understand what their mistake is rather than getting frustrated. So click next. As you can see, it has come to this flow. If I click next, if you come here, resource not found because the resource should be WC schools. Last one, if I make this post, it should return 405. So this was 400. This one is 404. This one is 405. All are errors. Now it should say method not allowed because if you see in this RAM specification, we don't have post method. What we have is only get. So click next, send. If we come here, if I click next, it will be invalidated and it will go to method not allowed, this one. So if I click next, if I click the error is like this. Where is the error? You see, we have the error detailed description and stuff here, but this one is clear message to return method not allowed. So if this one was post and if someone did that without paying attention, now when it says resource not allowed, they quickly know what to fix. Okay, so let's finalize this. If you come here, it says resource not allowed. The last question we talked about was, what if this one, the resource is wrong and the method is wrong? The resource also is wrong, it doesn't exist, the query parameter is also wrong. So in that case, we say the order that it checks is it starts with this one, with the resource, checks if the resource exists, then it checks if the method exists, if the method is supported, then it goes to query parameter. So the error message in this case should be related to this one. It should be 404, not found. This is what we saw. So let's quickly see that. Now I will send this request. If you come here and see it, you can see the error. It is not found, error type API kit not found. So it should go to not found flow in the error handler. Now, if you come, it should be 404. So error message 404 has what's the word we are looking for? Precedence over 400 or 405. Okay, so the other thing is also, let's see the API. Let me go to design mode. API console is the other one. This flow, what is it doing? This one, it helps us to experiment this, to test our application using API kit console. So for this one, what we do is, you can see here, it says, here we have the URL for it, just localhost 8081 console. So we use this in the browser. So if you don't have Postman, also to see the other advantages of the API console, just click this one. It opens in the browser. So you see, this looks like the API console in Design Center. So the API console in Design Center, we have it here. And this API console is from any point platform. And see summary, we have the endpoints, only one endpoint, WC schools. And the method it supports is get. The difference between this API console now and this API console is, this one is a real implementation. It will return real data. Let's compare them. Try it. I see the query parameters. This is good as compared to Postman. Also from that advantage, it tells me that there is a query parameter, required query parameter, and possible values, and the method, and so on. Now, shows me an example also here, but it doesn't, rather than the example, it will return actual data. So where is, yeah, we see here, Let me move this here. Try it. Customers, for example, from this drop down, I cannot pass the wrong query parameter now. And so customers here versus, let me go to edit mode here and try it in here also. Customers in here, send. So I have sent 2 requests in the API console. This one, it gets the dummy data from here because it is not actual implementation. Whereas this one, it should give me actual implementation. Oh, it is in debug mode, so it is waiting. Continue. Yeah, now if I come here, this one is actual data. This is actual data, like what you get in Postman, whereas this one is just dummy data. So it is good, the API console also you can practice with it. At least it shows you the specifications here and the inputs, what it should look like. So if you like it rather than Postman, you can try this one also. So what is remaining to finalize this one? Okay, so now let me stop it and remove the breakpoints. Then we'll deploy it and test it, and we'll be done. We should be done in the next 5 minutes. Remove breakpoint, remove breakpoint, remove breakpoint. Now we just deploy it and make it public just without applying any securities. Then we'll go how to apply securities so that only allowed people can use it and so on. So I think, did I cover everything I want to cover before going to deployment? Let's see. So yeah, we saw all of these. We saw about this and this. And we saw all these questions. So we are good. Now we are here. Deployed Cloud Hub. How to make sure you are connected. You connected your Endpoint Studio to Cloud Hub. Or if you are not, it will ask you to log in, no problem. So I come here and you go right-click on it. Right-click on it, go to Endpoint Platform, and you have here deploy to Cloud Hub. You can also deploy to Exchange, download, and so on. But anyway, let's focus on this one for now. Deploy to Cloud Hub. So we are deploying it to the cloud. That's why you see Cloud Hub. So in the request now, rather than including localhost, it will be the URL for it. So deploy to Cloud Hub. It will ask you some information here. This one, since it has, okay, numbers not allowed, it says, if I remove this, what does it say? Probably have deployed it. So only letters, numbers or dashes. Oh, numbers are allowed. So I have, let me make this 2. Come on. Oh, dashes. I should not have this. It should work. Only letters, numbers, or dashes. Okay. Oh, this is underscore. I see. Okay. Yeah, now it works. So you give it the name here, what it will be called in Cloud Hub. So we are pushing it to Cloud Hub. And there are other things that we are going to see coming in other classes, especially this one is a trial version, so you don't have control over it. As you can see, that's why it is great, but you can control the computer size. In this case, workers and worker size are important. Worker size means how big that computer is. For example, if you think a specific computer or a specific instance, how powerful it is, whereas workers is how many of them to have. So we are going to talk about that and so on in coming classes. But now just let's accept the default configuration and click deploy application. So now it will deploy it, we will test it, and that will be the end for today. As you can see, In this example, though, it is a simple one. We have done all the steps: designing, developing, and deploying. In each step, there are improvements we should do going forward. In the design, we'll do more advanced design, development also likewise, more advanced development, connecting to different data sources. It could be data in S3 or databases. And in the deployment also implementing security and so on. Each one of them will have their own improvements, refinements to work on. But at least for a hello world example, we have seen all the steps end to end. So see, as you can see, this one is it is deploying the application. Now, once it deploys the application, send requests. Okay, let's first get the URI for it. So if I go to the Endpoint Studio, I have Runtime Manager. I should see it under Runtime Manager once it comes here. If you go to Runtime Manager, okay, I have renamed my environment. Let's see which one it will deploy. Was it Sandbox? By default, it should be that Sandbox. I think Sandbox for me is this one. Or let me see. Anyway, once it finalizes the deployment, it is going to give us details about that API. Okay. This one, okay, as you can see, deploying, design, develop, deploy 3 to Cloud Hub. You may close this window at any time. Open in browser, let's open it in browser. Now the status now will be deploying. Then once it is deployed, it will be active. Okay, I have under Runtime Manager these APIs. As you can see, this one, it is deploying. Whereas this one I have stopped them. These are from subcodes. Okay. So you can stop them or start them until this gets deployed. For example, let me show you just if I click this one. Okay, I have to go to another page. That's fine. Okay, so once we see details about it, the name is here, and the status, I see it here, the runtime version, when it was last modified, and so on. And if we go to API Manager, let's see what we see. So we have Runtime Manager and the API Manager. We'll see each one of them, their functionalities. It takes some time to get used to them. I don't know why my browser, it seems an external thing is controlling my browser. Okay, it has started anyway, since we have to end this class. Let's just see this and we'll be done for today. So I have this domain, as you can see. We don't have in the history any usage history here. If there once we start using it, we'll see the history here, like the requests coming in over time. So this is anyway the domain that you see. I can send a request to this domain. Just copy it, copy link URL, come to here, and then in the what I bring after that is that part corresponds to this part up to here, right? That domain corresponds to what it highlighted here. So I have to copy the rest parts. This one, including starting from the API, the resource should be correct. So W3 schools, and the query parameter should be products, and the browser supports we know get message. So we can test it in the browser, or in any point in Postman also. So you see, I got the data here. So this is from the cloud rather than local host. It is from the cloud. I can copy this also and test it, override this, and get data for products. Oh, this missing. So you see the error message also because it was paused. You see here, if you just make mistakes, we'll get the errors. You will get with the like the errors we saw before. If I make this orders, I get orders and so on. So yeah, I will push this to GitHub, this project, and please practice with that. And tomorrow we are going to see more. We are going to continue from here and build on top of that. But this is enough for today.